Nearly 6 in 10 Republicans say they will not vote for any candidate who admits Biden won fair and square.
So that's 60% of Republicans.
Well, it says 50%.
I never really trust these poll figures that much anymore.
Well, yeah, there's so many of the presidential polls and things over the last few
They're
years.
all
That was another
bullshit.
thing that
It's
was
really
like,
so easy to
wow,
manipulate this
especially when
stuff.
Trump won, because they were like putting these polls out literally the day before that Hillary's going to win like in a landslide. You know, Trump's going to barely get any votes. And then after that, you're like, man, the polls were like really fucking wrong. You know, a lot of times they were oversampled on Democrats, and so it's like you could basically make a poll say anything you want by asking the questions, and that's why what I've seen the most credible is Scott Rasmussen. And so if I'm looking at political polls, I'm going to give more weight to his, and I'm going to look at all the rest of them, but I'm going to know his track record is better than everybody else's. So if I'm trying to figure out like which is more credible, I'm going to put more weight on his because he hasn't let me down yet.
Yeah, it's really, really easy to manipulate data on top of just having data and then just pushing an agenda with the data. You can word it and phrase it how whatever suits you best. It's very, very simple to do.
You can ask a question in a way that will get you a specific answer.
Yeah. All right, we'll get back to the poll stuff though. I really just don't like poll. Like,
there's a lot. I know what you mean. Polls.
Because it's just significantly like, who are they asking? Which ones are they taking? Because also think of the people who are making the data, like making the poll. They could just choose to omit if they're. Because also, who's funding the poll? That's a big thing too. Who is funding the poll? That takes a lot of stuff. So the people who are funding the poll, they're gonna align with whoever's the funding wants it, so they get more funding.
Just like Russia. Hillary Clinton funded all her campaign. The Democratic Party all funded that. You got to give her credit, man. That was pulling that off with that much assistance from the people in media and different people in government. It's like they got some power. They got friends in high places. That's what happens when you're in government all those decades. You make all those connections and you make those friendships, and all your buddies get staffed at the different agencies. Like, hey, bro, do me a solid, will you? No problem, I got you. Hey, I'll see you at the country club this weekend.
That's literally how it works.
Yeah, exactly.
That's actually how so much stuff works in our society. It's insane. It always worked that way too.
And then they had to return the favor, correct?
It's just monkey scratching each other's backs.
Yes.
That's what it is.
Call right back. Hey, remember that favor I did for you? Well, it's time to pay back. Yeah. Lord.
Money cuts a lot of ties.
Yeah, when you have money, you could definitely cut a lot of ties.
So, the whole reason why the 6 in 10 Republicans and why so many people that are on the right, what they've heard, and there's been a lot of stuff of irregularities. There's like 30 states that are auditing the votes and what happened. And there's been a lot of things that have come up. I mean, there's like, you got chain of custody documents like we were talking about at lunch, is that if one person picks up the ballots in the sealed boxes, they have to sign for it. And when they drop it off wherever they're bringing it to, that person's got to sign for it. And so they know the chain of custody, where those things went. And a lot of that stuff was either missing or destroyed, sometimes on purpose for some of the different counties. Some of the courts said, hey, we're impounding these machines because we want to do an audit of them. And the people that had control of the machines erased them. There were different logs of data and stuff that was done that was deleted on purpose. And it's like, so when you see stuff like that, you go, if everything was legit and on the up and up, you're like, oh yeah, here's a copy of the data. Knock yourself out. If everything was above board, it was no big deal. But when you got people in different cities doing things like that, when machines aren't where they're supposed to be, and then ballots go missing and they're unable to account for it. And then like we were talking about, like Maricopa County, there was a paper that was specified for the ballots, and I think it had a security strip in it. And then when they did the audit, there was like 6 or 8 different types of paper used or in the ballots, the actual ballots from the election. And so if you got ballots printed on 6, 8 different types of paper, that's not the legal paper that's required. What does that tell you about the validity of those particular ballots? It brings it into question if those ballots were legit or not. And so there's a lot of things that came up in different areas. So it's what people really need, because even like we talked about on the one of the other news pieces that we talked about was how people on the left, when Trump won, were like, "Oh, he must have cheated. The Russians helped him," and so they didn't believe. A lot of people on the left didn't believe the 2016 election was legit. And so now, because Trump lost, you got people on the right didn't believe it was legit. And you look at all these like little irregularities and shenanigans with the voting machines and the data and the chain of custody stuff and stuff with the ballots. I was like, what's up with that? Why isn't the media excited? Everybody like, well, let's dig into this and figure out what the hell is going on. What does all this stuff mean? But instead, there's, it's conspiracy, and everybody just, if nobody believes in the legitimacy, or the fewer and fewer people believe in the legitimacy of elections, that's a problem. Then nobody's going to accept the election results. But if people have 100% confidence or a high degree of confidence in the votes, and that their vote was counted and that it mattered, then everybody's like, oh, well, my guy lost. Screw it. Better luck next time. But if everybody's questioning the legitimacy of it, then even Joe Biden was saying that the midterms are, if we don't get this law passed, then that means the midterms in 2022 are not going to be legit. And so now he's already telling his voters that no matter what the outcome is, if we don't get the outcome we want next year, that's because it was not legit. And that's not healthy for a constitutional democratic republic. People have to have faith in their elections that they're legit. Because if people don't believe voting matters, then you get disintegration of the society. Nobody's going to accept the outcome of the elections, any elections. So it's really important that we get this right and that we don't concentrate power in Washington, D.C., because then you got an even smaller group of people controlling the elections. And depending on who, it's like Stalin joked that it doesn't matter who votes. The only thing that matters is who counts the votes.
Yeah, number at the end.
You concentrate power. It doesn't matter what it is, whether it's in a teachers union or in a defense industry or in intelligence. When you concentrate power in anything, or government, state, local, federal government, you concentrate power. Corporation, you concentrate power in a corporation, you get a monopoly, it gets abused. Yeah. And then the people suffer.
I like to think about the concentration of power. Say those people who achieve those positions, when they die, there's a big power vacuum for that whole concentration of power. So everyone's just fighting for that concentration of power. So you get some nasty individuals in those positions as well, too. That's kind of the problem with it. Like, if it's so concentrated, this small sect, everyone's just going to go there.
I saw a tweet on, it was by Jesse Kelly today. He was talking about Pol Pot, who the Khmer Rouge communists, they're responsible for killing millions of their own citizens. So when the communists took power, the people on his central committee, there was like 20 of them, the top guys in the Communist Party with Pol Pot. Within a year, 18 of them were dead. And so that's what happens. You get the most ruthless, murderous person rises to the top, because they basically take out all of their enemies, and then they keep everybody below them. They're either family, or they're well connected, or they're just in constant terror for their lives. And then they're able to just totally dominate everything, because anybody gets in the way when you have concentrated power like that, it was like 2 or 3 million people died in Cambodia as a result of the Khmer Rouge taking power. Anybody that had soft hands, it meant that they were bourgeoisie, or they worked in an office, and people that had like calluses on their hands, it meant they were the workers and they worked in the fields. They were fine, but the people that had too soft hands, they got shot too in the killing fields. And so what happened was they killed so many of the educated people in their society that they didn't have engineers and people to fix their power grid and their power plants and stuff like that, because they'd all been murdered by the Khmer Rouge. It's just like, it was like a frenzy. You ever heard about the killing fields?
Not
Yeah.
It's just
sometimes.
literally
Brutal.
skeletons, fields and fields. There were millions of bodies. They would just bring you out there and shoot you and just
Leave
would
you
rot.
there?
Just leave you there to
Yeah.
rot, and the birds and the animals to pick your carcass apart.
They had no remorse. They didn't care. They just left your body there.
Yeah.
No
This happens all
proper
throughout history all the time. And when
burial.
you try and stay ignorant of it and believe, oh, this doesn't happen, it happens.
It's a civilized society. That's
Yeah.
what they said in Venezuela.
No, yeah, the first bullet point, as Corey was saying earlier, people thought that 2016 was rigged. Now they're saying that 2020 is rigged. But this
And
article
Biden
started
saying
off.
2022 is going to be rigged if we don't pass
Yeah.
this law.
Byron, did you hear that TikTok? What you want to tell Joe Byron? What's
Joe
up,
Byron?
baby? Yeah, they call him Byron, and all that was like a whole TikTok. Byron. It was so hilarious.
So Brandon has been replaced by Brian. Or Brandon? Or what's it?
Biden. So
Byron.
Byron, yes.
Yeah.
It was
Let's
a
go
whole
Brandon is now let's go Byron.
Byron, and then take me out to dinner. But anyways,
Oh my God, I had a hilarious. Sorry to interrupt. I was at a game one time, and this lady behind me, Washington, she's from Washington. So some people in the audience started cheering, like, let's go, Brandon. And she just got pissed and livid. Just like, oh, that's so disrespectful. All this crap, all this stuff. But she's the same lady 4 years ago yelling, fuck Trump in the episode. Like,
Yeah.
it's ridiculous. It's just the hypocrisy. That's just what gets me, the fucking hypocrisy of our world. Like, just, oh my God. This is the main thing I don't like about people is just they're all hypocrites.
It's like what Dostoevsky said. A man who lies to himself and believes his own lies becomes unable to recognize truth either in himself or in anyone else. And people that are lying to themselves, when they come up against the truth, they don't like it and they get angry and they get triggered because they got a wound with it. Because their whole identity is they've built this identity in this model of the world that's basically bullshit.
Yeah.
And deep down they know it's bullshit. And so when they get called out or it's in their face, that's why they behave that way.
Exactly. I think that's why more people's egos, it's just their egos. Their
'Cause she
egos
gets
are holding
angry,
on
and
to their
behind
reality.
anger is always fear. So
Yeah.
she's afraid. Deep down, she's afraid that everything she believes in is bullshit. And because she lies to herself, she can't recognize truth. And it's hard, like that Twitter quote I was talking about in another podcast we did. When the people can't tell what is real, you can't resist. When you don't know what's
Yeah.
real, you can't resist.
It's like
Because
Plato's
you don't know what
cave.
to resist. You
Yeah.
don't know what the truth is.
Have you seen like the Plato's cave thing?
Yeah.
Where it's like the prisoner.
The
That's
allegory
exactly
of the cave.
Yeah, it's the same thing.
mm,
Where they're just shown these shadows, and they're only shown the shadows so they believe the shadows are real.
The allegory of the cave. Or Plato's allegory of the cave?
And that's
is it?
exactly what's happening. Yeah,
Is it Plato?
Plato, yeah. It's exactly what's happening nowadays, where we're just shown shadows and illusions all the time, and so many people believe it. No one can discern between the shadows. That's not taught. We're not. It makes sense though. I mean, since we've been raised, we're not raised to be educated and question things. We're raised. Think of like our school systems. We're raised to be just good, disciplined, listen to authority, don't question it, be compliant, be nice. That's how we're raised to be in our society.
So anyway, we were starting to tell this story about a girl who applied to be a journalist. She had great credentials, did a great interview, and so we thought we were all going to work together. And she showed up very prepared, had all these ideas for stories and things she wanted to do. Said she had been through my work and everything. And then she never sent her paperwork and stuff in. And we did a little filming the other day. And then Jennifer got a reply from her, which is kind of funny. And I'm going to read it. And so it just goes, to show, because she obviously leans left. And I don't think she researched our content or any of this kind of stuff that we talk about. But she claimed she knew all about it and was, she came with ideas and everything. So she texts and says, actually, I would like to resign my position. It's a great opportunity, but unfortunately, I do not agree with some of the opinionated commentary Corey has to say on his podcast. We have different visions, and I respect him for that. I do wish you all the best of luck. Thank you. So we got one person in the interview. Jennifer got a person, that same version in the interview. And then when actually we got together, she gave us a version that was fake, basically. It wasn't real. And then afterwards, she went and actually finally did her due diligence and stuff, and didn't jive with it. But she's supposed to be a journalist, because journalists are just, hey, we'll report the facts, and the facts go where they go. But because she doesn't like my opinions on things, she can't handle that. And that's indicative of a lot of the people that lean left, is they can't have any people, they don't want to be around people with dissenting views. And a good friend of mine, who we all know, I can't mention his name on camera, we call him Bob. If you listen to the Corey Wayne and Bob podcast, it's that guy. He's got a lot of liberal, left-leaning friends, and as soon as he talks, mentions the word Trump or something like that comes up, oh, I can't. And then people like literally got to leave the party. They get so upset that they can't hear anybody else's opinion or anybody else's point of view other than what they believe, because their model of the world is so fragile that they just can't even tolerate having it questioned or getting an alternative point of view. And so it's always interesting. We heard this girl say one thing, but her actions reflect, and then the final text was like, something completely different than what she told us.
Well, as a person, I think you have to respect what others say and do. Like, you can't change their opinion. Everyone's going to have their own opinion, right?
And that's the beauty of it.
Exactly.
It's beautiful.
And you just have to respect it, whether you agree with it or not. Sadly, sometimes you're not going to agree with it, but what are you going to do? You can sit there, you can argue, or not, just listen and just hear their side. And obviously, you're going to have your own side, and then you can compare. It's like, okay, I heard what he's saying. I still don't agree, but whatever. But you don't have to make it a big deal.
It's never going to get better if you shut it down. You realize if you actually just have the conversation, wow, we actually have way more similarities than differences.
Yeah.
This is just a trivial idea thing we disagree on. But we kind of separate ourselves.
I can't deal with this.
And that's the funny part. When you actually sit down and really talk with somebody who has a different opinion, just after 5 or 10 minutes, you realize, wow, we actually have very similar opinions. We're just kind of we just have different ideas.
Correct.
We kind of phrase it differently. We have the same concerns
Failure
and
to
stuff.
communicate. As Stephen Covey used to say, most people would listen with the intent to reply, not to understand.
Yeah. Everyone does it. I've done it myself, and it's a hard thing to kind of
Look at the TikTok videos and all the hate comments and all the insults, personal insults about my appearance and everything else they could try to come up with to try to insult me or belittle me or make me feel bad, so I change my behavior, my beliefs, or the way I show up. Instead, I mock them because it's funny.
Were you going to say something else?
No.
Mock your enemies mercilessly.
Well, for this girl that was applying for this job, I wish her the best. It wasn't a good fit. However, as a journalist, you got to just do your part. Can't really give in your opinion because it's going to bite you in the butt one day. So the only thing you got to do is just state the facts. And you're stating the facts to a person that's going to have his or her opinion. And
that's why we call the segments news and opinion. You're the news, I'm
Correct.
the opinion.
So
Chunky's the opinion.
Yeah. So as a journalist, I'm here stating the facts. I do my research. I have no problem. And I listen to the opinions that Chunky and Corey says. Sometimes I'll agree. Sometimes I don't. But like silently.
Bullshit coming out of their mouths.
I won't say that. But like in my mind, it'll be something else. But also for what I want to do in life, I can bring in my opinion. So it's just listen and just show it.
What big reason why we hired you.
Yeah.
And then even in the interview, you brought that up. You're like, I don't want to give my opinions. I just want to do the facts. And I was like, that's what I want you for. Do the research. Just like the RFK thing that we did. Is after listening to you go through everything, I was like, wow, I have a different perception of that now after hearing the facts.
Exactly.
What was in the media. Remember, all media is narrative.
Correct.
They're trying to tell you what to think.
But the discussion, we're facilitating discussion, which is huge because you actually get a better understanding, not just the surface level basic idea. It's like that thinking, you're just thinking with your like immediate kind of like reptilian brain almost, not really with your critical thinking kind of brain. But once you really delve through stuff, you understand it better and your opinions change. And I think that's what we need more in this world. People just communicate it better instead of shutting everybody down. Actually talk to them.
Just like Caroline's opinion of the green.
They're judging every book by
green
cover.
Juice just changed. Exactly. I got flicked off by her pinky.
That's
pisses her
hilarious.
off when I'm right, which pretty much is all the time.
Hey.
Oh, I love that little eye roll right there.
Well, I don't know. The green juice does magic. It does awake you, give you energy. Sometimes you don't want to admit you need it, but like you're going to remind us. And hey, we just have to take it, if anything. But yeah, going back.
Because we were talking about Dostoevsky's quote about lying to oneself and people's model of the world. And when people's model of the world is, when they come up against truth that's different than what they believed, it's very unsettling to them. And they have a problem with it, and that's why they get angry and they want to shut down the other side, because if their way of looking at the world is wrong, then everything they think is wrong. Everything they built their life on is wrong. And that's scary as fuck.
And they're facing their whole ego. It's just kind of like an ego thing. It's honestly, that's what it really boils down to.
It was like you and your
People need more ego deaths.
situation with your ex.
Ego.
But I think also, like, do you remember
You
when she
had
was
a
speaking?
perception of
In
what
the
was
lunch?
going
In
on,
lunch.
and I helped
wasn't
to
here.
illuminate
You wasn't
what
here?
the reality
No, I don't
was.
think
And then once you saw the reality for what it was, you suffered for a
school.
bit.
Oh yeah, you were in
But
here.
in the long run, you felt
Yeah,
a
that's why I
lot
don't know
better.
anything
Now
about
you're
it.
free
That's
of
why
it.
I'm interested. What?
She said, Corey, I don't know if you remember this, but she said something in lunch. Caroline, you might remembered. Oh, no, I think it was here. Never mind. She was here and she said it. I think you were talking about weapons. And she said, no, that growing up, it wasn't her thing. That dad didn't allow her, something like that. Yeah, she was talking to you about that. She wasn't talking to me. And I was just hearing because I was like,
I just remember hearing her saying something about how they didn't have him, or I guess I don't think I was listening that much.
oh, okay. Because I thought I heard her say that her dad didn't want her to do stuff like that. Like whatever her father told her to do, that she wouldn't do.
Well,
And
maybe her
stuff like
dad's
that.
a lefty too, and said guns are bad.
So that, so growing up, she
So
would
she
hear
knows
all
I
this kind
train
of
with
stuff.
one of the top trainers in all Southeastern United States, former Special Forces guy, and it's like, oh, I'm exactly the type of person that she was told to stay away from.
Oh Lord. Oh. I mean, everyone's human. Everyone's different. but-
They're dangerous. You're an idiot and you don't know what you're doing.
It's a job. If you need a job, you need the money and experience because you want to be
She's
on
supposed to be
air.
a journalist, an unbiased journalist, and so all it tells me is that she can't be unbiased.
So it also tells what happens in the future. Will she be able to handle now?
Well,
if
she'll
she
go
ever
work at a
did?
lefty station and fit right in the rest of the plastic people. But that's all. It's a dinosaur. It's a dying industry. Their audiences. This kind of format is what, because people want truth. They want to listen to people that have credibility. It's why Joe Rogan is doing so well, because he's just a curious guy trying to get to the bottom of things. Like having Dr. McCullough and Dr. Malone on, and just like, the guy that invented the mRNA technology. It's like, he'd be a good guy to interview about this stuff because he designed it.
Mhm.
I don't think there's anybody would be a greater authority than that or more credibility. So, because we're all just trying to find what the hell's really going on. What is the truth of all this stuff? Because we know the people in government have they'll say one thing one day and the next week they say the exact opposite. So it's like, and as a citizen, you're trying to figure out what the fuck is going on. This guy just said the opposite last week. And you're just trying to figure out what's real. If we can't resist if we don't know what's real. All media is narrative. Just remember that.
Yeah. So let's see what happens in the next couple of years, but it won't be doing well probably with all the things that go on. But going back into the Biden and Trump and Republicans and Democrats. Now, my question is, do you think the Republicans that don't want to vote for any candidate that admits Biden won't won fair and square is selfish, or?
Well, that's what we were talking about. It's if people cannot get the truth from the news, it's like, what the hell are they supposed to do? And so whatever news you consume, you're getting depending on the side, you're getting a different version. So it's like, what's real? What's the truth? I just want the damn truth so I can make a fucking decision. And so because of the news they're consuming, and like I said, the shenanigans that we went through that I mentioned, the chain of custody stuff, the ballots being on different paper that wasn't legal, I was like, what does that mean? It's like, that's the kind of, and then we're like, what is the truth? What does all this stuff mean? And instead, everybody in the media is trying to tell us that everything's fine. It's like, but what about this stuff? Why don't you do some fucking investigation and get to the bottom of it and find out what it is, to the media? And instead they're trying to convince everybody of what happened. And so this is the result. This is the result of too much fake, inaccurate, and misleading news, is that the Republicans are just trying to figure out what happened. And so 6 out of 10, they're like, they don't, just like if you look at the Democrat numbers, they were really high. A lot of Democrats didn't believe 2016 was legit. And so you got a lot of Republicans that didn't think 2020 was legit. And it looks like the Democrats are going to get crushed in the midterms. And so the Democrats are already saying, well, since this voting thing isn't passed, then and when the federal government can't take over all the elections, well, it means that the outcome of the 2022 midterms is in doubt before it's even happened yet. So in other words, if they don't get the result they want, then, well, it was rigged. But if they win, then they're like, hey, everything's legit because we've been running things. So it's like they're creating a straw man, if you will. If they lose and go, oh, it wasn't our candidates that sucked or our policies that sucked. It wasn't legit. And we told you a year ago it wasn't going to be legit. And you didn't listen. You should pass this legislation now. Well, the other thing is you got to consider in the Republican Party, there's a lot of what they call rhinos. It stands for Republican in name only. And so these are people that run, they say they're Republican, they say they're conservative, and then they basically vote for the uniparty, which is Democrats and Republicans. The majority of the blob, the governmental blob, votes for pretty much the same thing down the aisle. There's not much deviation. Yeah. Well, so they get elected, promising all these things, and then they get in and they just kind of, they vote like they're a Democrat, and that's what pisses people off. The Republicans are like, I voted for this guy, and then as soon as he gets in office, he goes against it.
Well, the way I like to think about that
or like people complain about Biden now. He made all these promises, like student loan debt forgiveness, and what did he do?
Nothing. I think they said something about healthcare workers. I'm not sure. I read something, but I have to double check it if it's accurate. If you're a healthcare worker, they'll forgive your student loans. That was said on Instagram a couple days ago.
Who knows? Well, my point is, so the best one-party system is a two-party system with the illusion of choice.
It's the constitutional democratic republic, which we have, is the best bad idea for government that humans have ever had. They all suck. But it's the best of all the bad ideas that are out there.
Let me see what I show you in polls.
Because government attracts people that want to run and regulate every aspect of people's lives. And they'll say and do anything to get elected. And that's what, happens on all sides of the aisle. A lot of people now are pissed off about Biden's not doing what he promised.
If you look on an actual political sphere compass, the right and left are actually really close together. And in America, the right and left are actually really, really close together.
Well, America's always been a center-right country.
Exactly. Our left is actually on a political spectrum is actually center right. It's actually in the right. So it's really just kind of a one party thing with just slight deviations and just slight things. That's why I think it's just there's no really solution. It's people are like, oh, this has got to change. This has got to be fixed. I mean, the system's kind of working how it's supposed to be working, Like legislation, if you just form it this way, if you're making the legalization, you're going to make yourself have the power.
Legislation?
Yeah. Legislation. You're going to...
Well, the legislation is written by the lawyers and the lobbyists of the biggest campaign donors. So even the politicians, it's brought in, it's written for them, their assistants put it all together, and that's why this stuff ends up on everybody's desk mere hours before. Thousands of pages end up on their desk hours before they're supposed to vote on it. And none of them even read this shit.
Yeah.
They literally don't even read what they sign.
Even if they do read it, most of them probably don't understand the implications of it.
Well, a lot of them are. That's what's interesting. Most of them are lawyers anyways. But like I said, they got a few hours to review a 10,000-page bill. It's I think it was the Health Care Act. They didn't read the fucking thing. It was a small group of people put together and just stuck on the desk. Oh, wait, everything's in there that we promised.
They don't really care because as long as they're getting paid. That's the thing, too. Politicians make so much money through shady ways.
Yeah, trading stocks.
Yeah, it's literally just insider trading.
They write legislation. They know about legislation. They know it's going to pass before it actually happens. So then they just buy stock, and those companies are going to be affected by those things.
Literally.
That's why they go in and they make $182,000 a year, whatever it is, and they're in there for a few years and they're worth tens of millions of dollars. Like Bernie Sanders, he's gotten wealthy. Pelosi's worth hundreds of millions of dollars.
Yeah.
Like all of them go in broke and they become wealthy on stocks that are affected by the legislation.
And it's on both sides. That's what I'm saying. It's the whole system.
All of them are doing it. That's why they're also like Dan Crenshaw. Everybody called him out early. He's like, because he's crushing it in the market. He's like, hey, it's the only way I can make money. So, I mean, he's got an unfair advantage. It's insider trading, basically. If legislation is going to force a certain thing to happen or like a product to be bought,
or
you buy that stock when the idea is to buy low, sell high. And if you know something's going to drive the stock higher because of legislation, you just buy the stock.
Yeah, or if you know a business is not going to be able to be operational,
yeah,
you bet against that stock.
You can bet against it. Yep, it's totally legal.
And you know exactly the dates those things get enacted in before. But this is always
it's good to be a gangster.
This is the beauty of the time we live in, though, where we can actually have this information and know about it. Because before, this has always been happening. It's just your common man.
The media never ever talked about this stuff.
Obviously, yeah. Why not? Well, you think about it. Who does the media get their money from? They're just another cog in the machine.
They're advertisers.
You got to buy the balls.
Anyways, back to our story.
No, I'm just listening.
Estefania. Estee Lauder.
Estee Lauder. Alrighty. So, there's this bar graph in the newsyahoo.com article website, and it states Republicans who value Donald Trump's endorsement tend to be evangelicals or Fox News watchers. So it's basically in deciding how to vote in upcoming elections. Whose endorsement is more important to you? Question mark.
Most important to you.
Most important to you. So for Donald Trump, it has the purple, and then it's
56% Republicans.
Correct. And then the other Republican leaders is kind of turquoise, like a green, dark green. I don't know.
Teal.
That's like a teal, yeah.
So you see the difference between purple and teal, and then the numbers. So you can see that the purple numbers for all is high. So you have
still between like 50 and 60%.
Yeah. So you have Republicans who describe themselves as a born again or evangelical Christian. Got 64, and then you have 18. Republicans who do not describe themselves as a born again or evangelical Christian, 50 against 28. Then Republicans who watch Fox News as their primary cable news source, 61, a bit high. And then it's against 24. And the last but not least, Republicans who do not watch Fox News as their primary cable news source, 53 against 24. So I think it's the same for both who watch or who doesn't watch Fox News as their primary cable news source for the other Republican leaders, but it's high for Donald Trump's purple graph. It shows a difference. So if you're deciding who to vote for or how to vote for in elections in the future, just make sure whose endorsement is most important to you, maybe. Would you follow
Endorsements
this,
don't mean jack shit to me. Because at the end of the day, what's an endorsement? Hey, if you do this for me, I'll give you my endorsement. It's like, whatever. I care about who's the character of the person.
Okay.
Because Trump just endorsed somebody yesterday. It was a woman who was an anti-Trumper who didn't like him, who he just endorsed. And there's another guy who's been a loyal, I think it was Robbie something. It's a guy's name, family-oriented dude. He was America First type of guy, big Trump fan, supporter, publicly supports Trump. And then Trump goes and votes for this woman who basically hates him. And that's one of the things that I'm not a fan of his, is that he has some people around him that just suck ass, and they're kind of like swamp people, and they cause him to do stupid shit like that, in endorsing people and just rubber stamping them and giving his endorsement when there's people better, just because of the connections that he has and the people that he's working with. So I'm not a fan of that. You know, he did a bunch of stupid hires. He hired a bunch of those swamp people, thinking if they were working for him, they would work in the best interest of the country. And all he did was try to slow roll his legislation and stab him in the back every chance they got.
This is straight from the article, if you want to read to yourself to get an idea. But it states that Trump has made it clear that supporting his election fabrications is key to his own personal endorsement. Indeed, the former president is backing primary candidates against state officials who bucked his attempts to overturn the election. And then the poll data also helps explain why Republican presidential hopefuls, such as Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, now wants to spend millions of dollars on special, quote, election crimes, end quote, police units tasked with finding fraud where they previously insisted there was none.
Well, we know there was fraud, but the reality is there's fraud in every election. The question is how much fraud is there? Like I do remember seeing video of these poll workers. I think it might have been Georgia, if I'm not mistaken. There's a video, you can see it. This woman, you can just watch her. She's feeding the same batch of ballots through the vote counter multiple times. And so what it does in the system, it takes like a photocopy of the ballot and then puts a number on the ballot and the batch number. And so the people that did the audit had, because it was all time stamped, they had the same ballot with this, they looked at the signatures and everything, the way the ballot was filled out, and they forensically matched it. You could see it's the same ballot run through 3, 4, 5 times, and it was like a big stack of votes for Biden that was run through several times. You would see it on video. You can watch this woman doing that. So it's like there is fraud, and I'm all for them putting people on law enforcement to go and audit, and anybody that did commit, prosecute them, because that's the kind of thing that will again give us all more faith in our elections. But when they just say, "Oh, it's a conspiracy theory," there's nothing wrong with it. They ban and block people, and they label them and try to delegitimize them instead of just saying, "Hey, if you got nothing to hide, just audit it." That'll give all of us peace of mind that our elections are secure. That's what we want. We just want to know it's legit. If our guy lost, he lost. But if we don't trust the process because there's shady shit going on, and you keep trying to change the subject, or you just say there's nothing there, or you label somebody, or you block them, or you ban them from even speaking about it, then anybody looking at that would go, they must have something to hide. Because if they were being truthful, if everything was legit, they'd say, here's all the stuff. Hey, look at it yourself. Count them yourself if you want. There should be no reason not to.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of agree. Like, what's wrong with having a force that monitors the elections? Like, that's kind of brings that peace of mind back to it. Exactly, kind of just what you said.
You gotta have faith in your elections.
Mm-hmm.
And our government is not doing things to give us faith.